It's time for IP in the news. And who do we have this evening?
Well, we have a U.S. Supreme Court battle. It's a copyright battle.
Right, it is. And so what happened was the famous photographer, Lynn Goldsmith, took a picture of Prince, and Andy Warhol took that picture and turned it into an Andy Warhol type painting, you know, with all the wild colors and everything. But he never got Lynn's permission. And so, of course, she is battling his estate in order to get money from the picture, since she was never compensated.
And it's gone back and forth through the courts, and they felt like she should have, she feels like Prince's estate. So Prince was a singer who unfortunately passed at kind of a young age.
Right. It's that Prince. It's not like some Prince in England or somewhere in Europe. It's the Prince.
But she feels like the estate should have bought a license from her to use that photo to reproduce. And they're saying it's fair use, which is a very complicated.
Yeah, I mean, it is complicated. The use has to be transformative. And so there's a lot of murkiness in that area of the copyright law. And I guess that's the reason why the Supreme Court decided to hear the case, because they don't decide to hear just every case. Or, you know, maybe one of the justices really liked Prince, and so wants to, you know, I don't know, get some celebrity out of it. Who knows? But anyway, we're awaiting this decision, and we'll find out if Andy Warhol's rendition of Prince, relying on Lynn Goldsmith's photograph, is transformative use.
Well, I think it's important because she's never going to get another chance to photograph him.
Well, that's true.
This is, you know, you can't just say, well, you use that one, I'll go take a different one. But anyway, Richard's Roundtable.
Yep. So I shouldn't put this in the form of a question. I should say it's time for Richard's Roundtable. And I'd like our guests to comment on what they just heard, or if you have a general intellectual property question, please let us know. So we'll start with Michael. Welcome to the show, Michael. So good to see you.
Richard, thank you.
What do you think about all of this?
I think this is very murky water, of course, right? So you obviously have both sides of the table there. I've always taken the opinion, I guess, of you've got to take your work, you got to put it out there, and most people are going to take it and do something with it when you're really good, right? I don't know personally if I'm going to fight a battle for that, because probably they've got money coming in anyway, right? So I think it's more than money. It's more principle focused. It's murky. I mean, I publish books. We deal with things like this intellectual property a lot with different authors. And I'm convinced that most people who are experts at what they do, this photographer, she's got a lot of other IP that's out there, but it's the fact that people are looking at her, they're leading or following her because of her expertise. I think she can do a whole lot more with that than fighting this one battle, in my opinion.
Yeah.
It's totally murky water.
Yeah, I agree. It's sort of like, on the one hand, you know, she had to take a killer photograph in the first place to even, you know, because there's a lot of photographs out there of Prince, right? She had to take the photograph. And then Andy Warhol, on the other hand, was another incredibly creative person, who then took that and probably took it to another level. And so I'm waiting for Prince's estate to come in.
Yeah.
Here
Well, but
think
about the flip side of that is, what if she took this and went the other way and embraced Andy Warhol and his whole organization, and said, let's take this to a new level, and let's take this, you know, higher than it is, because I took the photo, you did something really cool with it. Let's take this out. I think she'd have a whole lot more publicity, press, and probably money coming in if they took that kind of cooperative approach. That's just my thought, but it comes back to the principle of the matter, I think.
Yeah, I think it does too.
I don't know. I think anybody could take any of her photos and do anything they want with them if she didn't stand up for this and fight it. So I think what the Warhol estate, Warhol should have come to her and said, I want to use your photo, right? And do you want a license fee, or is there something we can work out?
Yeah, I mean, that's if Andy Warhol had come to me and said, I want to do this, I would have said exactly what Elizabeth just said.
Right.
Sure.
And they could have avoided this whole mess,
Yeah.
right? Because
But don't you not need to get permission if it's transformative enough? If
Well,
you're
if-
making something that's transformative enough.
and that's
That's the
the
crux of
issue.
it.
Yeah.
Is it transformative enough to not need
Which
a
is an
license?
utterly sketchy area.
Right.
You know,
Right.
what-
So
It's
we're
just-
talking to Karima now. So yeah. So
Yeah, I mean, so that's the whole issue. I'm sure. I mean, you don't have. You're not an artist like Andy Warhol would have the resources and hopefully the sense to have legal counsel, because when you get to that point in your art, it's a business, right?
Yeah.
And so he would have probably asked his copyright attorney about this, because I mean, this was standard operating procedure in a lot of his art, right? You know,
Yeah.
take a Campbell soup can and
Yeah.
do a painting of it. I mean, was he going back and getting permission from the Campbell soup company?
Highly
Probably not.
unlikely.
He's
No.
probably told you what you're doing is transformative, and so we don't need to worry about that, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so Lynn Goldsmith is sort of challenging that fundamental presumption. In a way, she's challenging the fundamental presumption of his work, which is because almost all of it was based on, or a lot of it was based on
Yeah.
photographs or renditions. So,
so who's next?
Henry, what do you think?
Well, I'm certainly no expert in this, but from my own humble opinion, it's not a photograph anymore. I haven't seen the artwork. I've been hearing in the news that this is happening in music now too. I think the legal system's always trying to catch up with what's happening.
Yeah.
And I don't think this is anything that's ever going to go away. But from the perspective of simplification, it is not a photograph anymore, and it seems like it's pretty murky waters.
Yeah,
I just read an article about the metaverse this weekend, and they're saying in the metaverse, there's going to be crazy hard to be able to track copyright, and there's going to be such problems. So, I mean, this is kind of like the last old school problem
Right.
of copyright that we have in our real world, because now it's going to go to the metaverse
yeah,
where you just can't track it.
right. Oh, I think you make a good point there, and Karima, and I do think the reason the Supreme Court took this case is because it's so fundamental, right?
Right.
Because and perhaps they see that this is an issue that really needs to get straightened out. If you have a video game and you take a picture of a landscape and then you transform that into code and use it as a background for a video game, was that transformative because it's no longer the same picture? And so what are the rules around this going to be, right?
Well, it's weird because we watch a show called Upload. I don't know if anybody's watched it, but they're at this place and it looks almost exactly like this resort in upstate New York.
And it
And
really
we're like,
does.
oh my gosh. But
Yeah,
anyways, Kenya hasn't had a
yeah.
chance to chip in. Kenya.
Everything is derivative from something else. So it's just how much
Right.
is how much has it been transformed in that ad campaign, in that TV show, in
Right.
that song? How long have they sampled that other song from that
Right.
song?
Right.
Yeah. So Kenya gets a turn. Kenya.
Yeah, I mean, as a creator, I feel like I'm team the photographer. It's her photo. I think anything that Andy Warhol paints is with an intent to sell it and make money. And they definitely should have just reached out to her and at least were courteous about the intent of use. I think what makes it gray is obviously the whole fair use thing, which I'm hoping Richard can touch a little bit more on that. Like, what makes something fair use versus something not fair use?
Well, the traditional elements are, if you're doing parody, if you're criticizing, or if you're providing a commentary. So I doubt that they would argue, I doubt that they would argue, parody or criticism, but maybe commentary. So the colors that he would have chosen for the painting would, be representing some sort of energy or some aspect of Prince's personality. And
Well, here they say that they depicted Prince, they took Goldsmith's portrayal of Prince as a vulnerable human being and depicted him as an iconic larger than life figure. So they feel that was transformative. And that so fair use doctrine applies, but
yeah, right. I mean, I guess that would fall into the commentary prong of that, right? And so yeah, I mean, with copyright, it's never clear.
yeah, the law is not as cut and dried as you think it is. Like one court can decide one way and another court decides, well, this is what happened with this. And so it's really, I don't know how they come up with the final solution.
I know.
guess
Well,
it's-
and they just have to, they have to kind of make up arbitrary rules so that at least people can order their affairs is what they're trying to do. So people know, okay, well, this maybe doesn't totally make sense, but I know what the rule is, right?
That's
And-
just humans in general, isn't it? We're just
Yeah.
kind of making it up as we go along.
Yeah,
pretty much.
isn't that true? You know,
Yeah.
I think some really good points have been made. I think, decency, just going to the person and having a discussion about it, as opposed to not is a good approach to that.
But that's us thinking that he even thinks it's not decent. He might be thinking in his head, I'm using your artwork, I'm gonna raise it up, so it might not even be in his head that he's doing
Yeah,
anything
like
wrong.
you
Well,
said, we're
the
all
other
humans,
thing-
right?
The other thing is how would he feel if someone took his painting and made their own rendition of it? Like, I feel like it could go both ways. So
Right.
I always think
Right.
if you're going to use someone's
Absolutely.
work,
Absolutely.
And he may have asked Prince. He probably showed the picture to Prince and Prince was like, this is awesome. So maybe he thought he got permission, but
But I guess
from
we'll
the
find-
wrong person.
I guess we'll
Right.
find out when the Supreme Court rules. So there's always that.
There's always that.
Okay, should we move on?
I guess it is time to move on. And I guess the takeaway is that, if you are trying to do a transformative issue or work, you really should contact an IP attorney or somebody who's familiar with this, not because they're going to be able to give you such a clear answer, but in many cases, the answer is clear. So there are many places where the law is settled, and at least you can get the advice like, well, make sure you get permission before you do it if you want to avoid legal problems, right?
and we recommend contacting Gearhart Law. Shameless plug.
Shameless plug.
Yes.
I
That's a good
plug I
idea.
can't refuse, right?
Way
You've
to
done
go,
a plug
Kenya.
that I can't refuse.
That's great.